Forms are the next topic of discussion. If you want to receive information as well as deliver it on a website, forms are the way to go about doing that. A form begins and ends with a form tag, just like a div begins and ends with a div tag. So with forms, this indicates the beginning of a form and its sets of properties. And everything that goes inside of that form, whether it is text boxes or pull down menus or fields to put in a username and a password, all of that information is going to go between the form tags. It's worth noting that forms do not function without the form tags being present, so you might be able to see buttons and interactive elements that a visitor could click on, but it won't function without those form tags. I'll go ahead and insert a form tag. You can type it in manually by just setting up your brackets and typing form. If you go to the insert panel and you click on form, which is just beneath the HTML section, the very first one is the form tag. And if I click that, you'll notice that the form tag is now present. Now, every element that you place into this form tag is going to have a name and a value. You supply the name. This is going to reflect the information you're trying to collect. And the value is what your visitor types. So this is what they enter into the box or the selections they make from a pull-down menu. Now, in regards to processing the information, creating a form is just the first step in collecting that information. You would also need to be able to transmit that information to a program that actually does something with it. So whether that's emailing that data to you, whether that is signing up a visitor for a subscription email of some kind, processing a credit card payment, creating an invoice, etc. All of that stuff would be done on the back end. So without having a form processing program running in the background of your web server, a form itself is useless. Now, I am not covering database content and how to collect this information in this course. This is purely based on the design. So when you guys are required to include forms on your websites, keep in mind they don't have to function, but they do need to be designed well to complement whatever's going on your website. So the first step to create a form is to add that form tag, which we have done. Now within that form tag, I am going to add in a form element. The very first one is a text element. So I'll just click that. You'll notice that a little box has appeared here in design mode, and I've added some styling to keep that relatively narrow at the moment. In design mode, it's going to highlight that object using a dashed red line, and that's going to display the field that can be edited. So if I highlight that, I clicked on it, it's highlighting the whole form. It's going to display that form's properties in the properties panel. This is where you can add an ID or a class. Action would be where you would link up the processing or database content, whether it is a file or a URL, you would do that here. If I click on the text field that I've just placed in, this is going to be where you can go about altering how that appears and what its function is. Name is going to be what would be sent to me, so I recognize what it is. So I might type in username. The title, or excuse me, the value rather, this is going to be the content that your visitor is going to input. So if I type in a value, I'm not giving the visitor the option to produce their own name. So I'm going to leave that blank in this case. The class, you can add a class if you'd like to manipulate it. You can style it just like you can with anything else. Title, this pops up as a pop-up tooltip in a browser. So this is going to be a tip to tell them how to fill in that information. So insert your username here. Placeholder, again, this is a tip for someone. Your username. So if I were to preview this, you'd see your username pops up. If I take a look at it in a browser, if I hover over that, it gives me a tooltip, insert your username here. A few other areas to pay attention to. Size. This pertains to how much space you're giving your visitor to display. If I were to set it up to a number, I'll say 25. That's the number of characters wide they have the ability to type. So you can see that it expanded a little bit. If you leave that blank, that's fine. What that means is if someone makes something longer than this box, it will scroll off to the left and only display what's on the right. But it doesn't limit the number of characters they can place in. Max length, however, does limit the number of characters they can place in. So if you want them to keep their username under 20 characters, you would type in 20 here, and that would, I'm still typing, and it just limits me at 20 characters. Tab index. I think at some point we've all probably hit the tab key to go through different portions of a form as we type in information. That is what this is in reference to. So if you want multiple fields to go in a specific order, you can type in tab index 1, 2, 3, and they will incrementally go in the order you've placed them in. But if you leave that blank, by default, it will leave that alone and just go based on the logical order of things, top to bottom in your HTML. A few additional checkboxes that can affect the way that your field functions. Clicking disabled will gray out that text box and prevent visitors from clicking into it or selecting any of the content that's already there. So if I turn that on and off, if you pay attention here, showing it gray means that it has been disabled and it cannot be used. The required checkbox makes sure that someone provides information in that text box. So should someone need to, or it must be mandatory that they include information in that particular section of the form, checking that is not going to let them proceed forward without it getting highlighted and maybe giving them an error like you need to finish completing this area. Autocomplete helps alleviate the annoyance of having to type in the same information over and over again. So this can allow the browser to utilize a saved username or password so that all you have to do is click enter or log in as you progress through using the site multiple times. Autofocus just gives the ability to have the cursor automatically pop up and sort of highlight an area to ensure that you start at the correct spot of the form. Don't worry about read only. It's kind of like disabled. It won't let you manipulate that at all. Now, all by itself, the form doesn't have much information visible to give someone a visual of what's needed other than the placeholder text down here. So one thing that you can do is add in a label form element. And what that does is that allows us to add a label tag. It's not a button up here. Oh, actually, it's way down at the bottom. So I'll just type in label real quick. Types in the label form element. And that just gives us the ability to label each one of these independently. You could use a p tag or something else, but the label makes it just a little easier to keep content for the form under wraps. With the email, similar to text, except it specifies that it has to be email with the @whatever.com sort of extension at the end to make sure that it's recognizable as an email. With the password, and I'll put in a label form here. The password is 2. The password field has a lot of the same visuals The major difference though is when you use it in a browser, it's going to protect that information. So whether it shows an asterisk or a dot, it's going to conceal whatever is being typed for security purposes. It does give you the little eyeball icon to check what you've typed in, but it does have that security sort of backup for you. Otherwise, in terms of the properties panel, it looks the same as text and email, the way that all three of these would look. With email, number, date, and some of these other special forms, these allow you to specify specific types of information. So as an example, URL will make sure that you put in a URL in regards to the way that the content is laid out. The telephone option is intended to validate telephone numbers, and you can specify the maximum length. Again, a lot of these are going to look very similar in the properties panel, but it will validate it for you to make sure that it is typed in the proper way. With the number form element, that this ensures that you get just the information you need from guests. So if you're looking for certain numeric values, you can specify those here. Color. This gives you a color picker. So let's say someone needs to pick a particular product color. The color picker gives you the ability to adjust a slider to pick a color that you want of, be it a product or otherwise. The date option makes a calendar, an interactive calendar that you can manipulate to pick a certain date, like to make an appointment or reservations. But there's also options to specify just a month and a week, or a specific day, time, dates and times together. You can specify a time zone with some of them also. So a lot of these are relatively self-explanatory. Again, if you've used forms before, they're pretty easy to, kind of figure out how they function. With checkboxes and radio buttons. With checkboxes, you either check it or you uncheck it. So at times you may have seen a survey or received an email or signed up for something online where they ask you to check, click all that apply in regards to maybe a search or something that you're looking for. Or even you might see legal text, like by checking this box, you agree to our terms and conditions, that sort of thing. So sometimes checkboxes are listed by themselves. Other times there are groups of checkboxes, and think of this as a pick all that apply sort of situation. I'll call this my meat survey. Type in the label, which is what they're going to see, and the value is what's going to be sent in based on whether they check it. So bacon, sausage, beef, chicken. And you can lay this out using either line breaks or a table to lay out that content, and then it lists it for you. And you can either select one or select none of them or select multiples. With each of these, you'll notice that each one gets a label, and then I have to click inside of that label to get the information for that object itself. You can also specify which one of these starts out as being checked. So if I click checked here, this one is for my bacon value. Since this is the Bacon the Candy of Meats website, I might opt to have bacon show as being selected when that gets viewed, so I have it automatically checked. But it can be unchecked as well. With radio buttons and radio button groups, same concept, but unlike checkboxes, once a radio button item is selected, it cannot be unchecked. So with a checkbox, you can turn it on and off. Radio buttons, once they're on, they stay on, and you have to have one at one point or another selected. But the way that you set them up and format them, same basic idea. Now, checkboxes and radio buttons can take up a lot of space if you're not careful. So this is where the select list comes into play. By default, it just looks like a blank drop down. But if I click on that, go ahead and give it a name. Pick your favorite meat. Title it, pick your favorite meat. Oh, now it's seeing it's giving it 4 separate IDs. That all needs to be one run-on thing. So favorite meat all together. I'm going to list my values. This is where I add in how many different values I want. So we'll do bacon, sausage, beef. We'll start with there. So instead of having this long list like this will allow for it to have a drop down to select as many years views you like. The selected section here lets you pick where the starting point is when you see that. So I've clicked on chicken. Now chicken is the first one to pop up even though it's not the first on the list. If I check this multiple checkbox, this lets me hold down the controller, the Alt key, and select multiples at one time if I want to select all that apply. So you get the same options as you have here, but it just takes up less space. Size shows how many list items are going to display at once. So instead of it being a drop down, it will display a list, and if there's multiples, it will still give you that side scroll option. Let's see, what else? File, you can set your form up to allow visitors to submit a file for you. So let's say, I know that a lot of technical support websites will give you the option to submit a file if they want to see like a screenshot. So it will pull up a choose file option and it'll let you select a file off of your computer to include and submit. If I preview that in a browser, and I click browser and click on a file, it'll plug all that in there. You can also opt to select multiple files. So rather than just having one, you can attach many items at a time. There are buttons, submit button, reset button. Just like with the choose files button here, clicking that will let you submit, reset a form, or you can code up a button to do whatever function it is that you'd like it to do. Typically submit and reset are going to be the only ones that we're going to use in class, but knowing that you have the ability to make a button do whatever you like, that can be really helpful. I'll go ahead and insert a submit button and a reset button. Space that out a little more. So submit query. You can see that I forgot to type in my username, so now it's telling you, hey, this is a required field, you need to do this. My username, my fake password, submit. And it's giving me a not found because I didn't set up the back end. But look, my browser's even asking if I want to save my password. So all the things that a browser does in order to try and make your life a little easier, it's giving me the option to save that. I will, of course, say no, but it's pretty handy. That reset button would just reset your form. Lastly, down here towards the bottom, this is the field set element. So essentially what the field set does is it is a form organization element that lets you group related elements together. To add a field set to any item on your form, what I recommend doing is selecting the sections that you want to keep together. So I might put my login information, my username and password, as a separate group. So within the form tag, I'm going to go ahead and highlight my username and my password sections, and I'll add a field set. Legend, this is going to give you the title. So this is going to be what the visitor sees. So this is going to be my login info, and maybe I'll also group my meet survey items. Field set, meet survey, click OK. So you'll notice that it's grouping all of that information together in a nice, neat, easy to understand way. So what the field set does is it doesn't do anything other than add nice little areas around each section to make sure that it contains related groups of information together as a single unit. So think of this in regards to other ways that you can group elements. You might use it if you make an online order form. You can organize all of the ship to information like the address, city, state, zip code, etc. as a self-contained component. Same thing with maybe grouping all the credit card information as its own self-contained component. So this arrangement can not only straighten out your forms, but also help anyone that's using assistive technology to understand the organization and intent of a form as they go. Browsers, as you can see, and I'll preview it in a browser as well, they're going to put a border around each form area. Actually, it looks a little bit better here. But you can use the CSS designer to create a custom border or background color to help you manipulate that. So in regards to forms, you can style them just like any other item. All of this stuff is just HTML, just like it is elsewhere on your web pages. And a lot of the labels or information that gets applied to each item, they are being factored in as IDs 9 times out of 10. So clicking on any particular form item, wherever it says name, it's being referenced as an ID, whatever you type in there. So that means you have the ability to completely manipulate it visually to ensure that you get the visual that you want that can accompany and complement your web designs however you see fit. So keep in mind when you do need to include forms, when this kind of information is required, do make sure that you are not only producing them and making sure that the form tag is around all of it, but you are also taking the time to make sure that it is styled to complement whatever content is going on visually on your website as well.